Stand up for yourself, and I'll back you up. 'Cause problems don't solve themselves. I'll tell you what, instead of would or could, I think you should. Draw a line in the sand and stand your ground. It's for your own good.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of The Voice of Families in Addiction. My name is Roy Poyan. I'm the Director of Families Impacted by Opioids. I am a chemical dependency counselor assistant and a certified mental health coach. And what we're going to discuss today is session one. What we're assuming in session one of the Shooting Star Families seminars is that you have been referred to us by somebody or by yourself. We've talked on the phone, and I've asked that you pull this particular episode down from our website so that you can start to become more familiar with what we will be doing together in the ongoing sessions and what we need to discuss as we get started today. So let's get started. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the first pull down, which is going to look something like this, and it's going to give you the chance to print this out and then put it in front of you. So for those that are driving, of course, this would be something that you could do in listening to this episode a second time while that document is in front of you. But on the first page, actually it's the third page in, you're going to see a diagram, and the diagram identifies kind of a flow chart of what we're asking for in information and what steps we take to keep that information guarded. This is kind of a HIPAA, Health Information Portability Act process, although we don't subscribe to HIPAA because we don't ask you anything that's clinically in nature, nor do we ask for overly sensitive information other than your phone number, your email address, and your name. So what we're doing is we're looking at the HIPAA format because we do follow the process to a very large degree. We just think it's a professional way for us to conduct ourselves. And we want you to have confidence that we really are sensitive to the fact that, you know, we're in a relationship, and when you're in a relationship with an organization, you want that organization to state up front how they are holding themselves accountable and to be transparent about it. That's what this is. So in this second part of the idea of HIPAA, we're looking at kind of a confidentiality, not kind of, it is, agreement between yourself and families impacted by opioids. So what we're going to take a look at is, what do we mean by confidentiality? Well, in coaching, there's a collaboration of a process that's ongoing in a relationship between you as the client and the coach. The coach experiences the client in establishing new behaviors, and the coach's relationship is to strengthen and is forward-looking as a collaborative with the client. The coach's agenda is developed and implemented in partnership with the client. The role of the coach is to help the client progress, meaning we want to really overemphasize the idea that we're helping you to progress, not we're kind of like guiding you or teaching you how to progress. We're going to give you information, and then you're going to determine how that is going to move you forward. So with that in mind, we're starting to engage in a full experience of coaching. And that's why confidentiality is required. The coach agrees to keep all conversations and information with the client private. Okay, no personal information will be shared with anyone without the client's express permission. Exceptions may be made if there's an imminent threat of serious injury to the person's self or to another. Coach is committed. My commitment as your coach, or anybody from our organization being a coach, By entering into this relationship, you as the client acknowledge that and we as the coach acknowledge the desire to make a behavioral change or some type of improvement in the client's life. You know, that's why we're doing this. So it's very personal. It's you that's changing. And the behavior changes often takes time to implement and then to learn how to sustain it. Kind of a piece of the change is uncertain and it varies, you know, for one person to the next. How you change, how fast you change, what you change into is of course a very individual basis. So we can't just sit there and say, well, if you do this, you'll turn into that. That's not the goal, number one. But number two, that would be impossible to do. Coaching sessions may occur in person, by phone, through video conference. It all depends on what venue that works best for you, the client, and for us as the coach. The coach-client agrees to adhere to established appointment times, okay? So if the coach agrees to begin and finish the appointments on time, if we're more than 15 minutes late to an appointment, the coach will assume it is canceled, and the client will be responsible for full cost. Okay, so what we're saying is the first 3 sessions are at no cost. Any session there forward, there's a fee for that. And because we're working and walking alongside of you while you're taking your material and learning lessons. So with that in mind, if you show up 15 minutes late to an appointment, then we're going to assume that you didn't make the appointment, and we're still going to expect payment for it. If we are 15 minutes late, then the session is canceled. For whatever reason, we didn't get in touch with you, which would really surprise me. But you won't be responsible for the session. And that's stated here in the document, as you'll see when you read it. So let's get to the introduction, because that's more of an administrative, the confidentiality, your signature is requested for that form, and understanding and having a conversation about HIPAA, and you know, permission to share information would always be sought after before any act of sharing would be done. As an introduction, you know, it's unlike a therapist. Coaches don't specialize in treating complex clinical problems. That's not our training, that's not our role. However, we do help in managing emotions, challenging negative thinking patterns, and we do improve relationship skills, and we do reduce stress and anxiety, all of which are bolstered in kind of the mental health field. So what's the difference then between a coach and a therapist? Well, primarily the difference between a therapist and a coach is that they generally speaking, and the therapist tends to focus on the past or present, while coaches tend more to focus on the present and the future. Therapists are more often focused on cognitions, cognitive behavioral therapy, while coaches are more focused on your behavior, the things that they can see. So a mental health coach is your personal mental health cheerleader, is a good way to look at it, a guide and a partner. They help you to implement a lifestyle changes to improve your physical health. The services is offered, often available through kind of like you see these in corporate wellness programs. So what does this mean in terms of mental health, what a coach can do? Well, in terms of mental health, a coach is the type of life coach that specializes in non-clinical mental health issues. The coach ventures deeper than a typical life coach, but stops short of diagnosis or treatment of mental illness. So what we're saying is that a mental health coach may not diagnose. A mental health coach can participate in discussions of a condition, but they cannot kind of like label it and do, you know, the assessment work that would lead to a diagnosis. So what we're basically saying is what makes a counselor different is the one thing that sets the mental health counselors is the legal permission to diagnose and treat a mental illness. So we could do an assessment, but we could not diagnose and then treat depending on what the assessment identified. Counselors will rely on particular reference books, a diagnostic and statistical manual you'll commonly hear phrased as the DSM-5. It is illegal for a non-licensed professional to declare that anyone is mentally ill or knowingly attempts to treat a mental illness. We don't do that, okay? But we do see it very often. And we will mention that we see it. And we'll mention why we think we're seeing it. But that in itself is not a diagnosis. That's just information that we're imparting to you, because what we're doing at that point is recommending that you see a licensed professional. And when you see them, you could tell them that, you know, your mental health coach had noticed these particular characteristics, and that's why the referral was made. That's very reasonable. And because we're not making any judgments, we're not treating it, and we're not labeling in terms of giving you an absolute of, you know, this is the condition that you have. We wouldn't know that. We're not trained for it. So some terminology used in the mental health industry is used a little too casually. Like when somebody sits there and says, you know, Roy, I'm so depressed. I never thought life would go this hard. Or my anxiety sometimes gets the best of me. Or I've had a fair amount of traumas in my life. These are relatively common expressions, and all of them use words associated with depression. So would this be enough for me to say, I think you might benefit from taking an assessment and finding out what level on the scale you are in terms of mild, moderate, or severe, and maybe what type of depression you're experiencing. But I'm not saying that you have depression. I'm just saying some things that would tell me it would be a good idea for you to get an assessment. And then that's where we would have you referred to a therapist, a licensed therapist. Keeping in mind, you can still stay connected with your coach, you know, because we're doing two different things. But it would be very likely that from a diagnosis, they would want to treat, you know, whatever it was that the diagnosis identified. So relatively common expression of all these terms is major depressive disorder. I mean, and general anxiety disorder. I'm kind of exaggerating when I'm saying these things, or post-traumatic stress disorder. These words, these three types of categories, are very broad. They have sub-indicated diagnoses to them. There's a lot of training and understanding of application to the diagnostic that, as a tool, needs to be practiced, and that's why you really benefit from having an experienced person on board. Because just to be reminded, this will be where the plan of treatment comes from, you know, and if the diagnosis is wrong, then you're going to be spending a lot of time on a plan of treatment that's not going to yield fruit, and that's not to anyone's advantage. So, you know, we want to make sure that if us as your coach identify something and we make a referral, please follow through with the referral and then start, you know, kind of like a whole new segment only on just that topic of whatever it is that you sought to get an assessment for. So the difference between a mental health coach and a life coach, you know, we're clinically trained. We are clinically trained. We do a kind of a CEU concept of knowing what these conditions are. We just are not expected to use them in a way that a licensed clinician would use them. So it's kind of hard not to know them. I mean, when somebody has depression and you've already gone through a training course on depression, and we're sitting in the same courses where they're telling you how to treat the depression, the only difference is we know we're not going to use that treatment skill. A detailed example is, it might be, I know I need to express myself and learning to stand up for myself. People will respect me more if I do. And I'm tired of being taken advantage of. Logically, I understand this, but it's like part of me won't do it. It just freezes me. And I can't get the words out. It's like something restricts me in my throat. And I'm standing there stuck. And it's even worse when I manage to get part of it out and I can't say the rest. So a life coach may help you set a goal toward yourself in self-expression, break the goal down into manageable chunks, and act as an accountable partner for you to discover the hidden strengths or a greater sense of purpose in terms of the client freezing in mind. In this scenario, the odds are with herself due to compartmentalizing of conflict of thoughts and feelings. See, we know that in this person's scenario, it's very likely that that's what they're doing. And that's what's freezing them up. So it's called kind of what they call a self-sabotage or an inner conflict. And so what you would do is combine two people, you're basically saying that you're two people in conflict and you're having difficulty communicating. So if we summed up the mental health coaches, what we're going to do in a nutshell is we'd say the communication to promote self-integration and healing. So we would focus on coaching you in terms of how your internal thoughts are communicating with each other. And that typically would, on that level, on a kind of a light side of that level, condition-wise would probably be considered mild, then that could be quite effective for you. And that may all be what you need, to overcome this. So it's in your adversity, part of your mind, that when it's engaged as a process, applying, some of the tools that we'll give you in mental health coaching, your practice and use of that will be the dramatic change that you experience. It will never be because we told it to you. Us telling it to you really doesn't add up to an awful lot. You doing it from what we told you, well, that's everything. That's the complete, that's what you might call the big enchilada. So with that in mind, when we're going on to the other page, we're looking at a diagram that kind of says, okay, so use these work sessions and use the homework so that you can get organized and you can start to take better care of the present and understand the advantages and what you can do to prepare for the future. In other words, you'll be more functional. So as you move through the introduction portion of this first session with you, we do ask you about suicide. It's a responsible thing to do. We don't, we're not trying to suggest, oh, you look bad or you think of suicide. That's not the reason we're asking you this. We're asking you this because every agency should be asking each person that comes to their door, are you having suicidal thoughts? Yes or no? Matter of fact, right now, go ahead and answer that. Yes or no? Are you? I don't know. I'm not there to hear you, but okay. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Yes or no? Have you ever tried to hurt yourself before? Yes or no? Do you think you might try to hurt yourself today? Yes or no? Do you have the pills or weapon in your home to kind of live out this plan? Yes or no? If you think you might harm yourself or hurt hurt someone else, we're not going to leave you alone. Okay? So if you're answering yes to these, we got to stay with you because you're in a critical state. Okay? So the most important thing you could do is just be honest, and then hopefully people respond in a responsible way, and get you the level of care that you deserve, and because you were honest in presenting yourself, and that you need. We're going to then move on to the idea of you. And in order to understand you, we're going to ask that we take time, and you take time on these sheets to tell us about yourself. So we're going to kind of do this in a structured way, okay? The first part of the tell yourself section, tell me about yourself section, is that we look at it in segments of a couple of years at a time. So let's first look at childhood. What were and you'll fill this in on the paper that you've printed out, downloaded, and then printed out from our website. So that's on the Shooting Star families page of the website, by the way. So what is it that you're looking at? Childhood years up to age 13. And what we're looking for is, in general events that happened, who was involved, and how did you deal with it? So we're looking for times that were hiccups in your life. And that doesn't mean this is a negative conversation, but it will sure look like that by the time you're done. I mean, we could sit there and say, okay, from age up to 13, what things happened that made you happy? That's more of a therapist thing to do than it is a coach's thing to do. We're going to be asking about trauma, okay? And if something happened between the beginning of your life and age 13, we give you 3 places to say what they were. And then we ask you to drop down and put it on a timeline. So it's not important, just as important to say, well, Roy, when I was 11, I watched just a gruesome auto accident, and it horrified me. I mean, the blood and everything that I saw, it was terrible. So we're going to ask you to drop down to the timeline here, and you'll see these little hack marks on a line bar, and put in the date that trauma happened. And if there's multiple traumas, then reference them. That happened to me, and then I saw my brother get mugged, beaten up really bad. They were using baseball bats, and it was terrible. So, okay, what date, in and around what date was that? And that way we start to see, in your inventory of traumas, when were they, what were they? And we're not so much concerned at this stage, we're just inventorying them. So we're not going to sit there and say, okay, what'd you do about it? How'd you do about it? What do you think about it now? We're not going to go there, in this particular exercise. But you are going to use this as you start to learn more about addiction in the family and how it impacts you. So years from 13 to 20, same topic, same instruction. We want you to go through anything that happened during those years, list them out, what they were, and then go to a timeline and say, when did they happen? Okay, what they were and when did they happen? Let's look at the other years, early adult years, from 20 to 35. Do the same thing. What happened? List them out, and then when did they happen? Put it in a timeline and label each of the traumas. You see, you don't want traumas to be in your life unlabeled. It sounds kind of silly, but once you can label them, you can draw them up and deal with them when you're in therapy sessions. So it's going to be helpful for you. Some people have had a trauma, and then, a time goes by, and then they had 2 traumas, and then a time goes by, and then they had 1 trauma, and of the one that happened when it was 2, they dropped one of them off. They didn't mean to, but it's kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that did happen to me. I forgot all about it. Well, your mind did not forget all about it, and it's been eating at you, and it's been coming through in other behaviors today, and it's primarily because you haven't labeled it, you haven't dealt with it, you haven't found a proper place to park it. So we also do the same thing with your adult years. Once again, list them out, the traumas, and then on a timeline, put down the date that they occurred so that we can get kind of a perspective. And depending on how old you are, then we would look at senior years. Now, we're going to ask something else of you. When these things happen and they're trauma, typically we will turn to God and say, Lord, help me, or let me pray on this, or I'd like to see, I'd like to check in with God and find out what He wants me to do and how to respond to this. So we're interested in knowing a little bit more about, when did you use the Lord? What happened? Who was involved? How did you deal with it? Kind of a statement on your childhood years, and then your teen years, your early adult, and your middle years, and then your senior years. These are kind of important topics because we sit there and we think, well, you're not allowed to ask me about God. Oh yes, I am. I'm your coach, So with that in mind, you don't have to answer me, but I'm allowed to ask you. And if you were, if you're on the ball, you'd probably wonder, well, Roy must be asking me these things, because it's a part of what's going to be to my advantage. If you think otherwise, then you get the wrong coach. And that's an important issue. Finding the right person to do this coaching with is really important. And you can always call me. I'm at 440-385-7605. Be happy to set up some sessions with you. So what are the key things as we're starting to assimilate this? Who am I, in all of this, and how does my life kind of go through an ebb and flow, and the topic has to be addressed. Where are you with love? How do you use love? I have to feel that if you're listening to this, you're in the middle of you're a family member in the middle of the throes of dealing with somebody in your family that's addicted, and oh my gosh, where is love in all of this? Well, Roy, I love him enough that I'm listening to you, and I want to learn, and I want to make changes that are going to allow me to be more functional and have a greater potential to contribute really well to the family dynamic as we address all these things that are coming our way. That's fine and good. Congratulations. God bless you for that. But the fact is, can you tell me what love is? That's a very important aspect of your life. It's kind of like your mission statement. If you don't know what love is, you probably don't have a very good guiding post. A lot of the things that we are going to do probably won't do as well with. I'm not saying you'll be a total failure, but if you understand what love is to you, then you're going to be able to apply all these learning lessons in a much more effective way. And then what I need to ask is, how do you share love? What do you do? What do you use? When do you most often do it? Are there people that you're more inclined to deal with than other people? I'm sure there are. But the next topic is conflict. Okay, we're going to talk about love and conflict. I don't know that the two have to go together, but sometimes they do. Can you love somebody and be in conflict with them? That's kind of question number 3 on conflict, but yeah, absolutely you can. Sometimes the conflict is so that you can improve your love, and you're just testing out what ways, are best and most suitable between you and the person that you're expressing love to, or that you'd like to have them love you back with an expression of love. So what is conflict? Let's clearly define that, because you're going to run into the person who's misusing substances, and you're going to have conflict, hands down, unescapable. You're also going to have conflict with your mother and your father about what's going on here, and you're going to have conflict with your sister. And it's all going to be centered around this stupid drug situation. I say stupid because we'll learn it doesn't need to be there, but it is there, and we're accepting of the fact that we have to manage around it. But the fact is, it creates conflict. Can you kind of see that we have to talk about love, and we have to talk about conflict, because we're talking about the family dynamic in the middle of a very bad situation called substance use disorders, and it is impacting the family, and to ignore it is trauma unrecognized. That's not a good place to be for an organization, for an individual. So if you have love and you have conflict, what is the other area that we would probably be an advantage before we start into all this learning and understanding? Forgiveness. Okay, forgiveness is the third one. And we need for you to help yourself and to help us understand what is, in your mind, forgiveness. And how is forgiveness provided to another? How do you assemble yourself, your posture, your consummate, your console? We talked about that word before, and bring it forward and say, I'm going to forgive you. I'm not going to give you the answer, because it would only be my answer on how I do it, and I don't want to build a bunch of mini-me's out there in terms of how you handle your emotions is completely different than me. Thank goodness for that, trust me. How is forgiveness provided to another? So you'll need to address that. And then how is forgiveness in terms of given to oneself? You're going to have to forgive yourself over and over and over again, or this stuff is going to pile up like a weight of bricks on your back, and it's going to crush you. Forgiveness is a releasing tool. It's a coping skill. Love is a releasing tool. It's a coping skill. Understanding conflict is very much a life skill, and it's a coping skill. So love, conflict, and forgiveness is something that we'll go through in the first session with you. And then, okay, I have to do it. I mean, it's not like I'd be remorsed if I didn't do it, but I think you want me to do it. What is a soul? How do you separate a soul? You're a soul. Because what we're talking about is we have a bunch of souls that are inside people. Because let's face it, when you die, we believe that your soul lives on, it continues. The chemical composition of your body, it decomposes. It's almost like the soul is what gives the body life and the ability to think and do. Because when it leaves the body really just doesn't exist anymore. Bible says it turns back to dust, and it's correct, it does. So, what is your soul? And can you go there? Because if you do, you'll be able to survive a lot of this with the strength of a spiritual faith practice that you have. And that, it leads me into the next question. Then what is spirituality? Yeah, we are talking about these things, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But what is your soul? And what is your spirituality? So that is going to conclude the first session. And we'll do it together, and we'll walk through it, and we'll make it you. We're going to start off by saying, you matter a lot. And we're going to approach the topic of you, possibly in ways that you haven't done yet. Maybe you have. But if so, great, just use it again with this. If you haven't, then make yourself available. Don't be intimidated. We're not going to ask you questions that you can't answer, because all the answers are yours. There is no right or wrong answer. We don't have a sheet here and say, you got it wrong. No, whatever you decide is your soul is your decision. What we're seeking to do is that before we start to ask you to change, and you think, oh, wait a second, Roy, we're not here to get a situation where you're going to change us. Yeah, actually we are. We're going to give you information, and we're going to build the information in what's known as process learning. And you're going to strengthen and strengthen and strengthen. It's almost impossible to strengthen and not change. Okay? Can you go there with me on that? You're going to make changes because you're strengthening, and you're strengthening because you're adding knowledge that you accept and can apply to your life. It's the applying part that strengthens you. Just knowing the information, we've said it many, and we will say it many times in our training exercises, just knowing the information is meaningless unless you can determine a solution, develop a decision, and design a plan of action, the 3 coping skills. If you can do that with the information given to you, you will change, and more than likely, depending on what you're dealing with, it'll be for the better change. I want to thank you very much today for taking the time to review with us session 1. Go ahead and do the homework assignments that we've asked you to do. You've obviously done one, which is to go on our website and download the first session. We'll do the same for the second and the third session also.
Stand up for yourself, and I'll back you up. 'Cause problems don't solve themselves. I'll tell you what, instead of would or could, I think you should draw a line in the sand and stand your ground. It's for your own good.